I absolutely love cartoons. And in college, I loved introducing friends to my favorite cartoons from my childhood. We'd sit down on the living room couch, and I'd pick out a series I felt they'd enjoy. But I'd always do the same thing. Ideally, you'd introduce someone to a series from where it begins, the first episode. But when showing people some of my favorite series for the first time, I would always skip the first episode because 9 times out of 10, it never catches the full vibe of the show. The characters would be hollow, the episode's storyline would be too exposition heavy since they have the cumbersome task of introducing the entire concept of the show all at once. And overall, the first episode of a lot of shows rarely feels like the shows I've come to know and love. So today, I want to try to determine what makes an amazing first episode. And I'll be doing that using the series Avatar: The Last Airbender. To start, let's begin with the first part of the 2-part episode, The Boy in the Iceberg. The episode starts with a full-length exposition/storyline that will later be used for the show's intro. Now, this is exposition in its purest form, but it's done in a way that feels epic, and it becomes a calling card for this show. The stakes are instantly set, and we get a feeling of a world in pain and turmoil due to a missing piece. We then fade into Katara and her brother Sokka carrying out the daily tasks needed to keep their small village alive. We get moments that define the characters, like Katara attempting to use water bending, but lacking the skills and knowledge to do it properly. Or Sokka's standoffish nature to the bending world and exploration, as he is a non-bender and a young man who's been left to watch over his village while the older men are off at war.
Why is it that every time you play with magic water, I get soaked?
We then see a sibling argument that causes Katara's bending to flare up and slice open an iceberg, revealing a figure inside. While Sokka is reluctant to immediately help, Katara jumps in to pickaxe it until it explodes open, revealing a young boy named Aang. From the explosion, a beam of light is sent into the atmosphere and detected by Prince Zuko. Zuko has been searching for the Avatar, and now that he believes that he's finally within reach, he's going full tilt to capture him. Meanwhile, his advisor and uncle, Iroh, remains calm and mild-tempered, almost as if he doesn't see the urgency, or more likely, he doesn't agree with what's going on. Immediately after Aang's emergence from the ice, we see his personality displayed in all aspects of his being, from his movements to the tone of his voice and his dialogue. He's immediately identified as a cheerful, free-spirited airbender, which in this time period is very rare. Aang's taken back to Katara and Sokka's tribe, where Aang sleeps for the night, giving us a dream sequence /flashback/ moment of foreshadowing. Here we see part of the event that led up to him and his flying bison Appa being frozen in the iceberg. The next morning, Aang is introduced to the village, and we get more moments of his carefree nature. But now it's being increasingly contrasted by moments of the realities that the village has to face. Moments like Sokka attempting to continue warrior training with young boys no older than 9. He feels compelled to do this as the oldest boy left inhabiting the village, at least until the fathers come back from war. He's taken defending this place into his own hands. A couple nautical miles away, we have Zuko training basic firebending techniques that he's failing to grasp the true concept of, putting forth much more anger and brute force instead of the control and flow needed. Iroh is adamant that he needs to learn it correctly, while Zuko is adamant that he needs to move on to the next moveset. This moment is an introduction into an aspect of their relationship, which, like I stated earlier, is based on advice and guidance, in many ways extending beyond firebending. While out adventuring, Katara and Aang come across one of the village's forbidden places, a Fire Nation ship from a previous raid of the village. Aang, being curious, influences Katara to follow him onto the ship. Inside the ship, Aang starts to realize the timeline that Katara is telling him about the war and his own timeline don't add up. This leads them to the only justifiable conclusion, that he's been in this ice for 100 years, making Aang 112 years old. They start to leave the ship, but not before setting off a booby trap, sending out a flare, leading Zuko straight to them. And that's the end of the first part. Part 2, titled The Avatar Returns, starts with Katara and Aang returning to the village as the flare from the last episode flies overhead. The village elders immediately recognize the danger and exile Aang from the village. Katara tries to leave with Aang so she can learn bending, but is torn between leaving her family and starting her bending training. Ultimately, Aang makes the decision for her by leaving her behind. While sitting exiled somewhere away from the village, Aang sees the Fire Nation approaching the village and springs into action. At the village, Sokka stands guard, a lone soldier protecting his family from the unknown. The Fire Nation warship, led by Zuko, approaches the village, leading all women and children to look for cover. But Sokka, being the warrior he is, stands his ground, not budging, even as the ship runs right through the very fortress wall he stands on. Zuko steps on land and demands to know where the Avatar is, but no information is offered. Sokka attacks Zuko, who is a much better fighter than Sokka, so he makes quick work of him. What I found pretty interesting was the restraint that Zuko had while fighting Sokka. Now I know this is a kid's show, but there was room to make Zuko look like much more of a brutal person than he was shown to be. I think this has a lot to do with Zuko's storyline and how he has the duality of being once evil and then turning good. So this moment fits his character pretty well. Aang eventually shows up and reveals that he's the Avatar and is ready to throw down with Zuko, but surrenders in order to protect the villagers. Zuko takes him captive on the ship and sets off to his home to redeem his honor and have his father end his banishment. For Zuko, this must have been one of the most dizzying moments he's experienced in such a long time. He's been banished and treading water on a dummy mission, and now everything he ever wanted is in reach. But as Aang is being escorted to his holding chamber, he breaks free and starts the task of getting off the ship. Katara and Sokka, feeling as though their paths are intertwined with Aang's, now take off with Appa on a rescue mission. Back on the ship, Aang fights with Zuko in what I can only call an evenly matched fight. However, just as Katara and Sokka arrive, Aang is knocked off the ship by Zuko and plunged into the frigid waters below. This event triggers the Avatar state, causing him to water bend himself out of the ocean onto the ship and then sweep Zuko off with a wave of water. This is the first time we see Aang waterbend, as well as the full power and mystery of the Avatar state. Aang hops on Appa and the team starts flying off, until Iroh and Zuko attempt to stop them with one giant fireball. Aang quickly reacts by deflecting the shot and sending it into the wall of ice, stopping the fire ship in its tracks. The conclusion of the episode tells us the team's mission and purpose. Aang must learn all forms of elemental bending to stop the Fire Nation from ruling the world. Katara is planning to learn water bending, and Sokka is doing what he wanted to do in the first place: join the war, fight the Fire Nation, and protect his people. I felt this two-part episode did an amazing job in setting the tone of the show. Overall, the series is an epic tale of responsibility, family burdens, and moral codes. They were able to introduce all of this without it feeling cluttered. They also did a great job of introducing the world to the audience. From the beginning, we get a map of the nations, the terrains, the attire of the people, and the relationships between them all. We even get to see a glimpse into the range of fauna that inhabits this world. Our first introduction to the fauna is just a small, normal-looking gray fish caught by Katara. Nothing special. Our second introduction is a 6-legged, multi-ton flying bison that's been frozen for 100 years. We then go on to see penguins with 4 wings and see how Aang would normally interact with them. Now, if you're watching this video, 1, I'm hoping that you plan to subscribe, but 2, you probably watched Avatar in the past and none of this is new to you. But imagine watching this episode for the first time and seeing these animals, the waterbending, Aang flying with the glider, and Zuko firebending. All of that revealed and Aang telling us about a million other things that he's used to doing that we haven't seen yet makes us just want to watch more. Another element they did extremely well was the characters. When I go back to watch first episodes, the characters usually don't feel like themselves in comparison to the later episodes. For some series, this may be a good thing, like if a character was meant to go through a full transformation from a villain to a hero. For most shows, however, I feel like that change is a giveaway to how writers may have been still trying to lock down the concept of the characters at the beginning. But for the Avatar, I felt that all the characters presented in the premiere were very authentic. Every line of dialogue and action was honest to the respective character that I've come to know and love. Sokka was shown to be a protector dealing with what he feels is the responsibility of taking care of an entire village by himself. Although he recognizes this responsibility, he's not mature or wise enough to handle it as a true leader. He believes being a leader means being a warrior, but later on in the series, he kind of figures out that that's not the only way to lead. This fits well within the show because it becomes part of his story arc. Katara is a young, inexperienced bender who is also the only bender in the Southern Water Tribe. This ability in itself comes with a feeling of being unique, but being the only one in an entire region has made her need to explore this side of herself that much stronger. She's also shown as selfless, constantly putting Aang's well-being ahead of her own. All these characteristics continue throughout the show as she becomes Aang's closest, most attentive companion, while also becoming the most skilled waterbender there is. And we see Aang in this episode as a laid-back, fun-loving kid who has never experienced any of the horrible events of war that everyone else has. This makes him a blank canvas with no reason to be cold, bitter, or angry about anything. He's a burst of light that radiates through the Southern Water Tribe's village. Although throughout the show, his character becomes more serious, it's justified due to the pressures he faces and the aging that he goes through. Yet his essence doesn't change. He's still very much recognizable from beginning to end. All of what I've been saying pretty much stays true for Iroh and Zuko. I think most importantly, they laid out the stakes for us and tied them in incredibly well. For example, the war was spoken about multiple times before Prince Zuko arrived. But to make what's been going on due to Aang's absence truly visceral, we're introduced to a southern water tribe where the majority of people are off at war, captured, or have been killed. We get moments like this throughout the series that reinforce the idea that taking over the world means much more than land procurement. It means loss of life and loved ones, which Aang will be thrust into as the show progresses. So these are just some things that I was able to identify as important to a great first episode. Is there anything you guys think that should be added? Let's chat about it in the comments. And if you made it this far, take the time to drop a like and subscribe. Your support helps the channel grow and keeps you up to date on my videos, and it makes me happy. See ya.